Climate change and related impacts and consequences are the subject globally of much focus and debate these days. While projections on the various scenarios associated with changes in the global climate, in terms of the scale and impacts, are filled with uncertainties and at best can be termed as forecasts and possibilities. There is nevertheless a growing consensus that the climate is changing.
The weather and the climate are making news in more than 20 severe flooding that killed at least 72 people and the seas in the great.
Climate change is something that this world has experienced many times in its 4.5 billion years. There have been ice ages. There have been all kinds of things that have happened. And as a result of that, the earth has changed tremendously. For instance, in the Middle East today, which is basically a desert, you are finding a lot of oil. Where do you get this oil from? There must have been living matter over there. There must have been trees, forests, animals which died, went under the ground and got converted into oil over millions of years. Which means at one time there were forests. It is due to the changing of the climate that those forests died and have been converted into oil. Similarly, today scientists have discovered the temperature of the earth is going up because the sun's rays that come in cannot be reflected back into space. And this is because a sort of a curtain has been put over the earth with gases that have been emitted from the earth. These are called greenhouse gases. They're called greenhouse gases because they create a greenhouse atmosphere, a greenhouse effect. Carbon dioxide is one of the major ones, but there are many others. Methane, CFC, a lot of other greenhouse gases. Now as a result of that, the temperature of the earth is going up. And the carbon equivalent today is about 390 parts per million. When it reaches 450, that is the danger point. And it is going up at the rate of 2 or 3 parts per million per year. So we don't have a lot of time. Now where do these greenhouse gases come from? They come from fossil fuels that are burnt in power stations, in vehicles. They come out of methane, out of the ground, and a lot of other things.
During the past years, it is becoming clearer that human beings have a great influence on the Earth's climate machine. The main human-induced reasons for enhanced greenhouse gas emissions that are contributing to the warming of the climate include a dramatic rise in energy use, land use changes, and emissions from industrial activities. Furthermore, changes in factors such as increased per capita income and rapid population growth have favored increases in greenhouse gas emissions. Urban areas occupy only 2.8% of the Earth's surface, yet as of now, more than 50% of the world's population inhabits urban areas and they generate 75% of the Earth's waste. In urban settlements, rapid population growth and resulting land development that in many cases in the developing world is neither planned nor regulated limits chances of sustainable use of the increasingly scarce land resources. However, evolving understanding of linkages of rapid urbanization and climate change has now given this urban development challenge a new impetus and sense of urgency. A range of activities such as transportation, energy generation, and industrial production are associated with cities and their functioning that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Urban centers rely on inward flows of food, water, and consumer goods that may result in greenhouse gas emissions from areas outside the city. There are two ways in which the climate change challenge is being presently tackled. One, through mitigation, and the other, through adaptation. Mitigation that seeks to promote action through which the greenhouse gas emission could be limited is primarily focused on the contributors to climate change, that is, mostly the developed nations. On the other hand, adaptation measures are mostly being recommended for implementation in countries and cities that, though not being the contributors, are nevertheless at a greater risk from the adverse impacts of climate change, such as Pakistan. While Pakistan is a signatory to the relevant climate change related global conventions and protocols, not much progress has been made in terms of establishing the appropriate legislative and policy framework to facilitate required action. The scale of urbanization and the associated challenges are ever mounting in Pakistan. Karachi, being the only mega city in Pakistan, offers the most complex mix of problems and challenges. While Karachi still serves as the commercial backbone of Pakistan, there is a growing socio-economic disparity and growing environmental degradation. Karachi, for numerous reasons, needs to get its house in order. The global focus on climate change and the availability of related substantial financial resources offers a window of opportunity for urban managers all over the world to access the resources and plan and implement measures to not only prepare for possible climate change impacts but generally improve the sustainability profile of their cities. Karachi, the sixth largest mega city in the world, can definitely make progress in this regard. Shehri Citizens for a Better Environment, a not-for-profit organization based in Karachi, in collaboration with the Department of Architecture and Planning, NED University of Engineering and Technology, Karachi, and financial support of the Fadrich Noman Foundation, Pakistan, recently undertook a study that focused on developing a profile of Karachi city within the context of urbanization and climate change.
This study has been completed in a very short duration, a little over a month, and with very limited financial and human resources. So we cannot in any way claim that we have come up with a climate change adaptation strategy for Karachi city. That will be too tall a claim. And for a city like Karachi, a mega city which offers so many complex challenges when we relate it in the context of climate change. So what we did was, when we were faced with these constraints, was that we tried to have a very clear roadmap for ourselves in terms of what we wanted to get out of this work, what we could get out of this work, and we set for ourselves a very clear objective and scope for this study. And what we have done is that we have tried to identify the possible risks the city can be faced with within the context of the possible climate change scenarios that can come up, and what are the vulnerabilities the city has in terms of people and assets. We have tried to identify the most vulnerable sections of the community that are most at risk if a climate change scenario takes place. We have tried to identify the key assets in terms of our key institutions, biodiversity, and we have placed them within the context of the 4 key climate change scenarios that can come about: drought, overheating, flooding, and sea level rise.
The profile prepared can be termed as a roadmap to developing a climate change adaptation strategy for Karachi city and looks into identifying some critical vulnerabilities the city may be exposed to in the event of climate change and the possible consequences of climate change on the key physical and natural environment and resources. Recommendations have been made to improve the adaptive capacity of the city to prepare itself better to effectively cope with possible climate change scenarios and consequences.
What we need to take into account is the fact that all of these factors could just act as the warning bell, and we need to sit down together to connect the scientific explorations around these observations and also come up with appropriate strategies and mitigation measures, probably on the same lines as some of the more developed cities such as London, Melbourne and elsewhere have been taken. These are not only going to provide us with a framework for thinking as well as implementation, but will also act as a foreground for making our populations aware and capable to deal with them at their own level. It may not necessarily be the job of a few to deal with this issue. It need to be made an exercise which should be subscribed by all the institutions and the various cross-sections of the society according to their respective roles. Climate change should not be taken as a factor which can cause any kind of fear or unnecessary worries. Rather, it should be taken as an exercise whereby the inputs of various cross-sections of the society can be translated into appropriate actions wherever and whenever needed, according to the rightful frequency and importance that they deserve.
The context is grim. Human settlements, such as slums, are exposed to fluvial, stormwater flooding risk and hill torrents. Sensitive national installations and human settlements, such as fishing communities, are exposed to tidal flooding. Other than the Mali River embankment, there are no provisions for flood defences and drainage channels are choked or blocked. There is no provision of flood storage areas. If we take the case of a possible drought scenario, then the Hub River source, a rain-fed source, is a major water supply source for Karachi, serving a population of 5 million. Livelihoods of significant human settlements based in rural Karachi goats are dependent on farming, mostly using groundwater. Groundwater table is already lowering and aquifers are threatened due to human activities such as sand extraction. No water conservation, wastewater recycling or rainwater harvesting practices being promoted in the city.
Another thing which is very dangerous for the global environment, that's the deforestation, which is on the alarming rate. And in our Pakistan, we are facing the same situation, and we have very limited forest, and the forest conservation activities are less again. So we need to invest in forest conservation and restoration of those forests which were present earlier, and we should enhance the forest coverage inside Pakistan. Because if you see the climate change effect, so species are moving from lower altitudes to higher altitudes because of the heat island developments in these areas where the deforestation is taking place. So deforestation and CO2 emissions, chlorofluorocarbons, these are all together. They are adding to the CO2 buildup and other activities. So these are affecting our environment, and we need to check this for the better environment for future generations.
There is shortage in energy and substantial energy loss. Energy consumption is increasing and there are no efforts ongoing to promote energy conservation. Due to rising population density in inner city and increased traffic congestion, the likelihoods of the heat island effect is increasing even further.
Karachi, over the years, has experienced a rapid growth in population, and recent studies suggest that the population has swelled beyond 21 million. But unfortunately, our present public transport setup has not developed at the same rate, due to which our public is forced to travel on rooftops of buses. I think this whole scenario has given rise to private vehicle ownership in Karachi. According to an estimate from taxation department, there are more than 1.5 million vehicles on Karachi roads. That's why as and when we go out, we face congestion and we experience delays due to traffic. And the problem with vehicles is they do emit emissions, right? And things get worsened when they're stuck in traffic jams, because they burn more fuel when they are stuck in traffic as compared to when they are moving freely, at a steady pace. This has, I think, given rise to pollution in Karachi.
In the context of a possible sea level rise, biodiversity impacts on wetlands and tidal zones and possible loss of flora and fauna can be anticipated. Mangroves that can act as a buffer against tidal flooding are already being devastated.
So in terms of adaptation actions, what I would recommend is focusing on water storage and conservation, particularly अब क्योंकि बारिश बढ़ गई है, frequency and intensity of rain has increased, तो उसकी conservation की ज़रूरत है. And the second thing that I would recommend is simulation या drills on being prepared for disaster, specifically that which affects low-lying areas, जैसे है कि माड़ी आपका या कीती बंदर या within Karachi itself, then I would say really good या इस किस्म के जो इलाके हैं. So that would mean government planning and allocation of resources which focuses specifically on supporting communities in developing early response plans, और उसके अलावा उन्हें उनकी ट्रेनिंग के इमरजेंसी या फर्स्ट एड या रिलीफ काम में किस तरह से शुरू करना चाहिए and what they need to do in order to respond to a disaster.
There are issues that we have to resolve: climate change or no climate change. However, that cannot happen till we get our governance and institutional crisis resolved first. Climate change adaptation measures are something that can only be achieved through a participatory process that should be led by the city government. However, time is short. The way the city is developing presently is more in the nature of maladaptation rather than adaptation. This trend has to be reversed. The sooner we resolve the conflicts tearing the city apart and gather around a vision for a positive change, sooner the climate change framework may provide the better.